History lovers, let's travel back to one of the most dangerous weeks humanity has ever lived through. A week when the fate of the world rested not in presidential war rooms or military headquarters, but inside a cramped, overheated submarine deep beneath the Atlantic Ocean. This is the story of Vasili Arkhipov, the Soviet naval officer whose calm judgment during the 1962 nuclear standoff quite possibly prevented World War III. If you've ever wondered how close civilization has come to annihilation, and how a single human decision can redirect history, this is one of the most important true stories you will ever learn. In October 1962, tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union reached their absolute peak during what we now call the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Soviet leadership under Nikita Khrushchev had secretly installed nuclear missiles in Cuba, placing American cities within immediate strike range. When U.S. reconnaissance discovered the sites, President John F. Kennedy ordered a naval blockade to prevent additional missiles from reaching the island. The world watched anxiously as two nuclear superpowers faced off with weapons capable of destroying civilization many times over. But while politicians argued and diplomats negotiated, an entirely different drama unfolded beneath the ocean's surface, one that almost no one knew about until decades later. At the height of the crisis, the Soviet command dispatched 4 diesel-powered submarines from the Soviet Navy toward the Caribbean. Each submarine carried a nuclear-tipped torpedo roughly equal in destructive power to the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Their orders were simple but terrifying. If attacked, they were authorized to use the nuclear weapon. One of these submarines, B-59, would become the stage for one of the most consequential decisions in human history. Conditions aboard B-59 were brutal. The submarine had left port without proper cooling systems, its air conditioning failed in tropical waters, and internal temperatures soared past 45 degrees Celsius, 113 degrees Fahrenheit. Carbon dioxide levels rose. Crew members fainted. Communication with Moscow was cut off for days. Imagine the psychological pressure. Cut off from command, surrounded by enemy ships, overheated, exhausted, and armed with a nuclear weapon capable of triggering global war. On October 27, 1962, arguably the most dangerous day of the Cold War, American destroyers located B-59 near the quarantine line. Not knowing the submarine carried nuclear weapons, the U.S. Navy began dropping practice depth charges, designed only to force the submarine to surface. Inside B-59, the crew had no idea these explosions were warning signals. They believed war might already have started. The captain, Valentin Savitsky, was convinced the Americans were attacking for real. With communication lost and explosions rocking the hull, he reportedly shouted that they would not die without fighting back. He prepared to launch the nuclear torpedo. At that moment, the world hung in the balance. Here's the crucial detail that makes this story so extraordinary. Launching the nuclear torpedo required unanimous agreement from 3 senior officers aboard the submarine. Savitsky approved. The political officer approved. Only one man refused. That man was Vasili Arkhipov. Arkhipov wasn't the submarine's captain. He was the flotilla commander overseeing all 4 submarines, making him technically senior to Savitsky. He was respected, calm under pressure, and already known among naval circles for courage. Just a year earlier, Arkhipov had been aboard another submarine involved in a reactor accident. While others panicked, he had helped prevent catastrophe. That earlier incident built his reputation as someone who remained rational in crisis, exactly the quality the world needed on October 27, 1962. Inside B-59, as officers argued and heat suffocated the crew, Arkhipov insisted they surface and await orders instead of launching the nuclear torpedo. This was not an easy stance. He faced intense opposition. The captain believed they were under attack. The crew was physically and mentally strained. The submarine's environment felt like a furnace. Every instinct screamed that survival required retaliation. But Arkhipov held firm. Eyewitness accounts later revealed that the debate inside B-59 was heated and emotional. Savitsky reportedly declared that war had likely already begun above them. From his perspective, launching the torpedo was justified retaliation. Arkhipov disagreed. He argued that they had no proof war had started, and that using a nuclear weapon without confirmation could trigger irreversible consequences. Think about that moment. No satellite updates, no radio messages, no clarity. Only stress, fear, and explosions outside the hull. In modern strategic studies, this situation is considered a textbook case of fog of war, when uncertainty leads to catastrophic misjudgment. Arkhipov understood that acting on assumption rather than evidence could doom the planet. After intense debate, he persuaded Savitsky to surface. When B-59 surfaced, American ships surrounded it but did not attack. The U.S. Navy had never intended to destroy the submarine. They simply wanted it to identify itself. The crisis passed. No torpedo was launched. No nuclear explosion occurred. Had Arkhipov agreed with Savitsky, the nuclear torpedo would almost certainly have detonated against U.S. forces. American commanders, unaware of Soviet submarine protocols, would have interpreted the blast as a deliberate nuclear strike. Retaliation would have been immediate. Strategists agree that escalation to full nuclear war would have been extremely likely. The chain reaction might have unfolded within hours: U.S. nuclear retaliation, Soviet response, NATO involvement, global devastation, hundreds of millions dead in weeks, civilization possibly collapsing. All of that hinged on one vote. For years, almost no one outside military circles knew about Arkhipav's decision. Cold War secrecy kept submarine operations classified. Even historians studying the Cuban Missile Crisis lacked access to the full story. It wasn't until the 1990s, after the Soviet Union collapsed and archives opened, that researchers uncovered testimony from Soviet officers describing what happened aboard B-59. When scholars pieced together the events, they realized something astonishing. The world had come far closer to nuclear war than anyone had understood at the time. Arkhipov's refusal wasn't just brave, it was historically decisive. What makes Arkhipov's decision so fascinating for historians is not just the outcome, but, the psychology behind it. His actions reveal several traits that crisis leadership experts still study today. First, he resisted groupthink. 2 senior officers supported launching the weapon, yet he refused to conform simply because others agreed. Second, he relied on logic rather than emotion. While others reacted to fear and stress, Arkhipov demanded evidence before acting. Third, he understood long-term consequences. Many leaders focus only on immediate survival. Arkhipov considered the global chain reaction his decision might trigger. Modern military academies and leadership courses now use his story to teach strategic restraint and ethical command responsibility. One of the most powerful lessons from this episode is just how fragile human civilization can be. We often imagine history as shaped by grand strategies and massive armies, but sometimes it turns on a single conversation in a metal cylinder beneath the sea. Had Arkhipov been ill that day? Had he been less experienced? Had he panicked like everyone else? History might have ended differently. Historians sometimes call such moments hinge points, events where a tiny change alters the entire trajectory of the future. Arkhipov's decision is widely considered one of the greatest hinge points of the 20th century. The phrase "the man who saved the world" is an exaggeration. Unlike generals who win battles or politicians who sign treaties, Arkhipov prevented a catastrophe that never happened. That makes his legacy harder to see, but honestly, arguably more important. Prevented disasters rarely get monuments. There are no victory parades for wars that didn't occur. Yet, from a historical perspective, avoiding global nuclear war is arguably one of the greatest achievements any individual has ever contributed to. For fellow history enthusiasts and serious researchers, Arkhipov's story isn't just dramatic, it's deeply relevant. It teaches us how nuclear deterrent systems can fail, how miscommunication escalates conflict, and how human judgment remains the final safeguard. Even in today's world of satellites and instant communication, nuclear command systems still rely on human decisions. Technology may advance, but the moral responsibility still rests on individuals. Archipov's example shows that courage is not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it is quiet resistance, the willingness to say no when everyone else says yes. It's easy to analyze the Cuban Missile Crisis as a geopolitical chess match between superpowers. But what makes this episode unforgettable is its humanity. Picture the scene again. A sweltering submarine, exhausted sailors, explosions outside, officers arguing, and one man calmly insisting on restraint. That image reminds us that history is not abstract. It is lived, breathed, argued, feared, and decided by real people. Arkhipov was not trying to become famous. He wasn't thinking about legacy or recognition. He was simply trying to make the right decision in a moment of uncertainty. Ironically, that humility is exactly what makes his story legendary. Arkhipov lived most of his life without public recognition for what he had done. He retired quietly and died in 1998. Only years later did historians and international organizations begin honoring his role in preventing nuclear war. Today, scholars often rank his decision among the most important acts of individual judgment in modern history. Some even compare his impact to that of world leaders, except he had no speechwriters, no advisors, and no global audience. Just a choice. For those of us passionate about history, Archipov's story is a powerful reminder that the past is filled with hidden heroes. Not all of them commanded armies or ruled nations. Some simply made the right decision at the right time. His story also demonstrates why studying history matters. Without careful research, declassified archives, and persistent historians, we might never have known how close humanity came to catastrophe, or who prevented it. This is why historical storytelling is so important. It reveals the unseen threads that hold the world together. When we talk about world-changing moments, we often think of famous battles, revolutions, or treaties. Yet, one of the most important turning points in modern history happened silently, underwater and out of sight. Vasili Arkhipov didn't command a nation. He didn't deliver speeches. He didn't seek glory. He simply chose caution over panic. And because he did, millions, perhaps billions, of people lived to see another day. If you love uncovering powerful hidden stories like this one, make sure you subscribe to Era Fusion History, share this article with fellow history enthusiasts, and keep exploring the moments that quietly shaped our world.